Waiting on you.
Steven. I haven't done that in a while.
Oh, man, I'm going to need water for this one.
Grace?
Producer?
Yeah, we have a producer today. We're going to introduce her in a second, but before we start, so we had some technical difficulties again. Seems to be a theme. Cannot be perfect.
If you bring more than one Marine together in a room, there's a flux in the multiverse.
Gotcha.
So it's going to happen.
Hold on, I can hear myself. There we go. I like hearing myself. So we have 2 microphones to 3 people, so that'll be interesting.
It just means we got to get a little closer. That's
but
all.
It's the first time we have an in-studio guest, and I'm excited about this one. So we have our friend Dave. I'm going to let Dave introduce himself in a second. But before we do, I want to introduce his daughter, Grace, that came with him. Because she's right out there. Here, pick your head over. There we go.
She's the reason the mic don't work.
But Grace is here to be a semi-producer and a gopher as we need to. I think we need to
keep us from getting arrested.
I don't know that she can do that. She's not that good.
No, I'm the new DD.
She can drive, but she's a good bartender.
Oh, sweet. Just like Isabella. Well, can she drive yet?
Isabella, legally she can. She's not. She didn't get a license yet. She doesn't.
Oh, she can still drive, just not legally.
Correct.
So she can drive. That was the question. Mm-hmm. We didn't say it as if she could drive legally. We just
she drives tractors in Georgia when we go visit.
That she could drive.
don't read into it.
Yeah.
Dave, I'm going to tilt the microphone hopefully so you're catching me. What's up, brother?
Nothing, man. I'm just hanging out with you guys today.
So Dave and I met teaching a SWAT school in Shelby County, Alabama.
Alabama.
Years ago. And
is this where Triscuits and bicycles came from, right?
Biscuits and tricycles. Yeah, we can tell that story in a minute.
This is how I reference, like when he meets people and stuff like that. That's how I keep a timeline. Everything has a label. So this was Biscuits and Tricycle.
Yeah, we're gonna have to talk about biscuits. And I'm also Dave's Canadian friend. That also came from the same trip.
Gotcha. Yes, I know that story.
But yeah, so Dave had a very interesting career path, and I don't even know it all. I just know.
Probably can't know it all.
Yeah, if we do, he'll probably have to shoot us.
Yeah.
Do you have to shoot us, or can do something else?
No, I think I can tell you, and then we all get shot.
Yeah, I'm still bound by some non-disclosures, so I get it, but I'm okay with getting shot at this point. So
my non-disclosures are in a different continent. So.
Yeah, you're good.
It doesn't even count,
right? Different zip code. So Dave, well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, man.
We obviously know you, but I guess all of our listeners would not know you, except for maybe, I guess, if Tom Alibrando is listening, he would know you.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Oh, he's going to listen to this one, I'm sure.
We passed. He came in. I didn't meet Tom until he was at IWI because I was leaving Bremer. And then when Negroponte came in, he was coming in with DS and Negroponte, and I was leaving with Bremer and DOD.
Gotcha.
So different contracts. Same company, different contracts.
Yeah, so we're referring to Blackwater back in the day.
Yeah.
Which was part of your extensive career path. So tell us, where did Dave come from?
We're
going to put the microphone closer to you.
Yeah, so kind of started, I think I was in college for about a year and was...
Does it need 2 microphones?
I didn't, which one? And I didn't have a good path, right? I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. And a buddy of mine was going down to talk to the Marine recruiter. And so I was like, he goes, you want to go? And I was like, yeah, man. And I didn't tell my mom.
I'm only laughing because the stories are always so similar.
And all good stories start the same way.
You're going to meet girls. You're going to get a paycheck. You're going to have a cool uniform.
I think the funny part of it was, I didn't tell my mom anything, right? And then, you go do all the process, the testing and all that stuff. And so when it was like, yeah, you're going in, it's like, then I went and told my mom, I was like, hey, next week I'm going in the Marine Corps. She was like, what? And
you gave your mom a week. I gave my mom 2 days.
But it was, I think my recruiter, he was a really good guy. He was straight with me, right? Which is rare. But it also turned out, I think out of, I was in the less than 5% of people that he put in that were legal. Like he got in so much trouble. Like I think he ended up getting kicked out or something.
How do you go in illegal?
He was putting in like his waivers were false, and he was putting in people.
Not illegal as in the sense of immigration, as in like violations of certain things. You can actually join the military without U.S. citizenship.
I know you actually can get it based on serving in the American military.
You
that
hope.
makes you eligible.
I served with a Navy chief. He had 18 years in the Navy, combat vet, and was still waiting on his citizenship.
Yeah.
Oh.
So.
Well, you grew up in Kentucky?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Definitely. If you don't hear the drawl already, so it's pretty obvious. Not Alabama, it's a different drawl. So
what'd you do in the Marine Corps?
Started out, I was in 10 years. Started out the first year I was in the military police field. And I was driving around
a PM, not a MP, as most people would call it.
Right. And I was it's not what I thought, right?
Provost Marshal.
Yeah.
That's what they call him in the Marines.
Yeah. And he's the chief of police. And so I was driving around in a police car and I was like, this is not what I thought. Like the Marine Corps, I could have joined the police department in my hometown, and so did that for about a year. And it was a good time to be in. That was kind of the Clinton era. They were downsizing after the Gulf War was coming to an end. And so there was a lot of opportunities to bounce around. And so I ended up linking up with some guys out at SOTG, which was Special Operations Training Group back then. They did a lot of the training in 2nd Marine Division and 2MEF, and did some work with them, teaching some classes. It was a lot of like non-lethal stuff, and ended up going back. And then I was with like the SRT, like the Special Response guys, and which is like their SWAT team, right? Like the military SWAT team. Did that for several years. Ended up going over to Japan with the 31st MUSOC. I don't even think they call it SOC now. I think it's something else. And
it was SOC.
Yeah. It was,
so what is it for us ignorants that did not grow up in this country or did not serve in the Corps and do not eat crayons for breakfast?
And don't judge, because crayons are good, depending on your flavor. But
and they're organic, depending on what company.
And they digest easily.
Yeah.
And so the MUSOC was the MUSOC was basically a Marine Expeditionary Unit, special operations capable. They're required, I think it was something like 20-some, 30-some missions that they're required to do.
Before being certified as SOC.
Yeah, and you've got to go through a SOC certification, right? And so you do a lot of workups, and all the units are doing that stuff. My primary one was non-combatant evacuation operations. So if something happened in like an embassy, I was part of the advanced team that would go in and then get things set up for rolling people out.
Is that lessons from Iran, I guess?
Yeah, and we actually, but I was kind of in the stepchild MU, right? 31st MU, like you had 3 MUs on the East Coast, 3 on the West Coast, and then 31st was in Japan, and we were kind of the holdover, right? So we gap filled, and so we missed a lot of good missions because the primary MUs got all the money, and so I was like in the stepchild MU. And so, but it was
redhead though.
I was 2-4 MU.
Yeah. So yeah, you probably stole my mission in Rwanda.
I was on the Kearsarge. Kearsarge got a lot of action.
So did that, came back, and ended up back on the East Coast at Lejeune again, kind of doing the same things. And that's when we got introduced to dignitary protection. And so that was under the CID mission. Started doing that. That was when I was kind of running the counter assault team. Our SRT doesn't really have a job, right? Like, I mean, nothing ever happens if they're using the SRT. And it's like, I wanted to find them a job. NCIS was doing a lot of the dignitary protection work. And so we kind of formed that team into counter assault. And so we did a lot of dignitary protection from the counter assault standpoint. And then that transitioned into dignitary protection. And so that's where that foundation kind of came from. And then ended up meeting up with another group of guys. Anti-terrorism force protection was coming online big time. This is after Kobar Towers and all that stuff in the mid-90s. And so got involved in that. And then there was like a big effort with station level stuff to kind of ramp that program up. And so got back involved with the Special Operations Training Group and went out there and ended up kind of working out there for the last 2 years. I was in the Marine Corps, which was a pretty good gig. And then kind of the end of it came, they wanted me to go recruiting. I was like, look, I think I was a staff sergeant at the time. I was in the zone for gunny. And they were like, hey, man, you need a B billet. And I was like, yeah, cool. I'll go do a B billet. And they were like, well, like all I got is recruiting. I was like, yeah, I'm going to check out on that.
Next question. 10 years in the Corps, most people end up, you're like, I'm going to make it a career at that point. but getting out. So I was about to say, what made you want to get out?
You don't think you have the face for a recruiter?
I'm not a good people person, man. Come on. Like, have you met me? Like,
could have fooled me.
So I'm better now today, I think. Back then I wasn't. And I would have been like, dude, like, I'm not bringing you in Marine Corps. Look at you. Like, come on.
I'm glad that did not change, because we'll talk about teaching SWAT schools in a minute. And you talk about, I'm going to turn the microphone to me for a second.
Yeah, that's not me buzzing, by the way.
I keep getting notifications, but I don't know. But you not being, people's person, like you're saying, when we were teaching the SWAT school, that biscuits and tricycles story that we like, he actually had to have a heart-to-heart talk with that guy. At the school, we're teaching active shooter response. In the lunchroom, the cafeteria, he pulled him aside and he goes, "This will not be a job for you. You're always in shape. You can be a fitness trainer or something, but you should not be on a SWAT team." And the guy did not comprehend. That's how stupid it was.
Yeah, it was a challenge. And I'm fortunate enough. I have a full-time job, and so I kind of pick and choose the side jobs I want to do. And it really affords me the luxury of being honest. Right. And there's some people that just aren't cut out. And I pulled the guy aside and said, "Look, this isn't for you, man. Like this, you're in the wrong space, and it's going to get somebody hurt." And so I was honest with him. But, I think when I was looking at some of the feedback yesterday and going over the email you sent me, there was a good comment in there about, where LE is today. Right. And I would preface that with they're struggling with the same thing that I think the military is today, right? You're law enforcement. You're law enforcement. We still have a lot of law enforcement friends, is recruiting, right? And so it's really hard to field a SWAT team with really high level quality guys when you're struggling just to get guys into your agency. And I'm seeing that. I still interact with law enforcement in my current job because of their agreements with the sites that I go to. And they all say the same thing. We're having a hard time getting people in. And so it's a real challenge for them. So then to take that, and if you got an agency with 100 guys and, you're having a hard time getting those billets filled, and then you've got to put a SWAT team together that's 15, 20 guys out of that 100, getting 20 good guys is really tough.
Right. The argument would be that perpetuates a problem, though. And 10 years down the road, it's not going to solve the problem. It's going to make it worse.
Yeah.
And agencies maybe should do a deep, look inside and say, if I can't find the 6 people to be on the SWAT team, maybe I'm not running a class, or I'm just disbanding the SWAT team temporarily till I get better people.
Yeah, and then there's I think a multitude of levels there that I wrote a little op-ed a few years ago on this topic, and it was really from 2 perspectives. It was the facilitator and the student, right? And as a facilitator, there was, I saw a picture of a graduating class, and I would argue that boo thing, and I would argue that it was
biscuits and tricycles, man.
Yeah, totally. So the guys were, I would say like 75% of the classes by any standard were obese, right? And the nature of this particular course that they were in really didn't require that. It required guys to be fit. And I won't even get into the aspects of physical fitness and its effect on decision-making process under stress, right? That's a completely different animal. And then, so it's like, as a facilitator, like, how do you put that guy through knowing that they could potentially end up on a team where it could compromise somebody, right? But then also from a student perspective, so it was kind of written from both perspectives, that how do you consider your shelf life, right? We all have a shelf life. And, and no one went to kind of say like, hey, this is a young man's game. Like, now I can take what I've learned in my time and I can pass it on to others, but maybe I don't need to be the one going through the door anymore. And I think a lot of that's incumbent on the leadership. I see a lot of guys hanging around that want to hang around so that they can say, I'm doing that. I've got the hat. It's the cool thing. And unfortunately, I don't care what security discipline you're in, whether it's dignitary protection, law enforcement, it's not a vanity sport, right? It's really not. And so if you're not keeping your skills set up and you're not doing what you're doing, your peers should really be putting the pressure on you to say, hey, man, it might be time to move on. And if they're not doing that, they're not doing their team a favor and they're not doing you a favor. So yeah.
There's a lot of ego involved in that one.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah.
And kind of piggyback off of what you said. So two quick kind of side notes. One of them, the last defensive tactics class I ran for the Maryland Police Training Commission Recruit Academy, I refused to sign on any certificates. There was one recruit that I thought met the needs or met the requirements. I signed on her certificate. Everybody else had to go to my supervisor, and he signed it, because I refused to. So I failed the whole class. But then I remember we were teaching an advanced SWAT school in a different city in Alabama. And not to rag on Alabama.
Advanced.
Yeah. Love Alabama. I love teaching there. That's where I maintain my credentials. So nothing against there. It just happens to be that because we're there so much, the stories tend to come from there. But this guy shows up late and he's hobbling. And he's like, I'm the sniper. I don't have to run.
Dude, I couldn't keep a straight face. I was like, you have to be the most fit on the team. I was like, have you ever had to get up from a position and relocate to get an angle of attack to cover your team? And then you've got to get in that position and be able to engage, right? And still be able to execute that decision-making process. And I didn't even know what to say.
You had the bum knee, it's fine.
And I went through a lot of stuff on my agency. Thank the Lord, I'm retired now, so I can speak a little more on it. Similar, with running sniper drills when I was on the counter assault team. We're running hostage rescue drills where you got to sprint, get into positions and fire. And during this course of the drill, you're running suicides back and forth just to get the heart rate up and this and that. And the majority of the full-time snipers were jogging. And then us younger guys were, by the time we get into our shooting position, we're huffing and puffing, trying to combat breathing at that steady shot. And their response was, well, how are you going to take the shot now if, you're all out of breath and, you're this and that, basically saying we were showboating. I'm like, well, by the time you get there, they're going to be dead. Where's the trade-off here?
I remember when we went to Israel and we did the training with Avi Capone, who used to run the counterterrorism school for the Israel military. So we're doing a single-person active shooter response training, and Steve was the first one to go. And it started by running up a hill, running to the objective, right, and then making entry. And Steve did it, and did it in his tactics, not Israeli necessary tactics, but he did it. And then the enemies,
I was dying. I thought I did horrible. He comes up to me, puts his hand on my shoulder like this, like,
perfect.
And I'm like, great. I just embarrassed BK and everyone. And he goes, this is how everyone should be when they're done this drill. I was like, whoo, okay, good. I did good.
Right. So you got on Marine because you didn't want to be a recruiter.
Yeah.
What'd you do then?
I actually went into law enforcement for a couple of years. I was at the local level towards the end of...
In Kentucky?
Yeah. In fact, so while I was in the Marine Corps, I was using my leave time.
I did the same thing.
To train civilian law enforcement. Okay. And I was part of a program, I forgot what they called it at the time, but we had a lot of civilian law enforcement coming down to Camp Lejeune, and we were training them. This is all kind of before the White Letter, before Ruby Ridge and Waco. And so we were doing a lot of training, and then those guys would be like, hey, we really like this. You want to come and do a course for us? And so that kind of kickstarted that. And that's how I ended up going to Alabama at one point in the mid 90s and started there. And so I was teaching with another friend of mine and a group of guys from the Marine Corps. We were doing basically the Alabama State Trooper course, the Nighthawks course for them. For about 6 years, we would do like 2 schools a year for those guys. And so I ended up, when I transitioned out, one of the departments I'd worked with was in my hometown. And so they were like, hey, if you're not, and I kind of got on in the quick and, had a family. And so they're like, hey, if you want to move back home, we can get you on the SWAT team after you get out of the academy. We'll waive some of the stuff. And so I did that. And then 9/11 happened. And I actually tried to go back in the Marine Corps. And this is, you'll love this. They were like, no, it's going to be a quick war like last time. and yeah, I think they got that one wrong. And so, so I ended up transitioning over to the Federal Air Marshal Program. and great training.
Oh yeah, they got some outstanding training.
Man, I think we were the first 4 weeks, we were doing like 800 rounds a day, shooting. And then we went to about 1,200 rounds a day for the final 2 weeks of the advanced stuff. It's all, it was all quick time, short distance, a lot of point shooting. You would have loved it. Yeah, I am too. And so after 16 months of that, sitting on planes and nothing ever happening, I was bored out of my mind, to be honest. And a good friend of mine from the Marine Corps, and I mean, the Marine Corps Mafia is strong. The good friend of mine called and said, "Hey man, I'm down in Haiti. I need some help. I'm running the Aristide detail." And so I was like, "Yeah, man, I'll be down." And so packed my bags, went down there and did a contract for a little while on Aristide. Haiti was awesome. It's I would call it a semi-permissive environment.
Right.
It's pretty nice.
Was that State Department?
It's State Department sanctioned, but it was actually a private contract. I think President Aristide's wife was a American-born Haitian, and her law firm in D.C. actually put that all together. It was my understanding,
Interesting.
and so we were actually licensed, badged. Like I had Haitian Secret Service credentials, which was really weird. And
that's pretty cool.
And it was you would really appreciate it. Like there was a Haitian Secret Service that ran imagine the internal diamond, and then we ran the external, because the expectation was that if the shit hit the fan, the Haitians would bail out, and then we would bail out. And so we basically were running like a mirror package for the dignitary, and so we did that, and then again, back to the Marine Corps Mafia. Another guy called me, and Frank, as you know, had been dialed up. Frank Gallagher had been dialed up to run the Brimmer detail for Blackwater. He's biased to Marines, which that was a Navy SEAL heavy program with Eric running that, and so I got a call from a guy, Brian, and said, "Hey man, would you like to come over here? We need guys with protection experience," which was odd because I didn't do any protection work there. I went to that program, and they had it was a full complement, and but where they had a shortage was over on the aviation crew. And so I ended up going to the Little Birds and being a door gunner on the Little Bird for those guys. And I would say in the sliver of my professional experience, that little window was probably the best job I ever had in my life, right? And so wouldn't trade those days.
How many missions a day did you run?
Really just depended on the boss. But I mean, it wasn't uncommon. And Brimmer was a worker. He was up early moving. He would go to headquarters in the green zone, and then he was off. He was engaged with the various ministers. And so we were all over the place. I think I hit, every major province and city. He would always fly on the Blackhawks, and we would fly on the Little Birds and fly. Once they get on the ground, the convoy would pick them up, the advanced team and stuff. And then we would just fly cover for those guys. So, it wasn't uncommon to do 2, 3, 4 missions a day out into the red zone. So, yeah, it's pretty common. And then hang out. And then when we weren't doing that, we were supporting other activities. It wasn't uncommon to get a Mayday call from somebody and hey, we need help. We did that for state a couple of times. We had, a couple of times we had Army National Guard got lost or something like that and took some fire, and we go.
It was, I think it was in Najaf where one of the consulates was under siege, and it was Blackwater that bailed them out. The Little Birds came in and resupplied them.
Yeah.
That's a pretty epic.
Yeah, I was there that day.
Yeah, it was a pretty epic moment when it.
How long of a firefight was that? I think you told me once.
I think it was 6 hours.
Yeah. If it wasn't for the contractors, they would have been overrun and decimated.
Yeah.
So,
and it was really, Little Ben, White Boy, those guys that were on the roof that were part of the Najaf CPA.
Mm-hmm.
It was, in fact, I read an article about it not too long ago. That was the first time where private contractors were commanding active duty military people and directing the fire, directing them what to do. And then Big Army wasn't available to come in.
Right.
They finally got some Apaches in to help with a sniper that was in an adjacent hospital. And then I had actually been on mission that morning to cover Brimmer. We were flying top cover over in Sadar City, and came back. I was actually having breakfast with Hacksaw at the time, Steve Chilton, who was a former one. All of our pilots were former 160 guys, and Steve got the call from Frank and said, "Hey, can you come over to the Rotunda," which was kind of where Bremer's main office was, and told us like what was going on. Like they had already been engaged at that point for about 2 or 3 hours, I think, and said, "Hey." I was at that time, the Cowboy had left, and so I was the team
Cowboy's
lead.
the pilot, right?
Cowboy was the team lead, the previous team lead for the door gunners.
Okay.
And so I had taken the team lead slot for the door gunners, and so Steve was getting the pilot stuff and coming up with the plan. Told me, and Travis was there. And so told me to go like, hey, let's get a list of the gunners. And I mean, we had a ton of people volunteer. Frank had to turn people away that volunteered to go. And we actually, I don't know if I can say it now, it was a long time ago, but we actually took all 3 birds, which we never did. But we only had 5 pilots. So Steve flew our bird by himself. And then we put an extra gun in the co-pilot seat. And that was Eric Saxon, who was the lead for the advance. And so went down, like by some miracle, I think just us flying in kind of helped cool things out. Things subsided. We landed. There was a young Marine, Corporal Young, had been shot in the shoulder. And so he had already been bandaged up, but he needed out. So we put him on the little bird, flew him back to BIOP and got him treated, and then rearmed, reloaded, took more ammo and headed back. And yeah, it was a busy day, man.
I want to make a point because you kind of brought it up when you said there was no lack of volunteers, right? And there's always this misconception with private contractors that they're just chasing money, they're whores of war, right? That they're mercenaries. And I don't think many people realize that like things like that, you don't have to do that. You know, you're there, you know, but you do it because you still have a patriotism and a love for the country and those that are still serving, you know, and people mistake private contracting as someone who's just chasing money. And right. I think nothing could be further from the truth. It's like, you're not in the military.
I'm sure you have
anymore.
those people too, but
I'm sure, but there's more of, I think, these guys, especially
right.
when you're working in that environment, than you have that.
Exactly. And you got to account for who are the people that go into contracting, right? So you think about their background, people like Dave that were already in the Corps for 10 years, former law enforcement, stuff like that. The majority of the contractors that I know, at least, and I certainly don't know a lot of them, but most of them come from that world. A lot of them from special operations.
Right.
So those people would have that, you know, I'm going to care for my brother kind of attitude with them. So that would make sense. But with that, and I know Dave shared with me a story of one guy that came that was trying to be on their team that kind of faked his own credentials just for the easy money, right?
Yeah,
so those do happen.
I mean, you definitely had some of those guys. I think first of all, kudos to Frank. I mean, Frank really put his career on the line, making that decision, right? And but this is days after the Fallujah incident with the guys on the bridge, and nobody wanted to see that again. And, and so, in my mind, it's doing the right thing for the right reason. And Frank made a hard call that day that he knew could have really put himself in jeopardy and professionally. But he didn't hesitate to make that call. And the boss was protected. He was in the zone. So we took the birds down but we did have some of those guys that would show up and, we had one individual that, in the normal protocol when you came into the country was you would go into Kuwait and get vetted and do your paperwork, and then you would take a plane into BIOP, and then you would, you'd do the gauntlet for BIOP to the green zone, right. And so, but they had just bought a bunch of soft skin vehicles, and so my crew that was there, there were some guys that showed up and said, "Hey, you guys aren't flying. We're going to drive up." And so we're going to, and it's a long drive, man, from Kuwait to Iraq. And so we stopped for the night in Basra, and we're staying on the economy, right? And so as we're driving up, and you're seeing blown out tanks and everything from, just a few months ago when the infantry and tanks were rolling through there. And I was, the guy I was with, the guy named Rich Gardner, who was a dev guy and super cool. And so we stopped, and this guy, he was a former law enforcement guy, had no military experience. And he's like, "Man, this is really interesting." And Rich and I were like, "Yeah, this is cool, man. Like if we'd flown, we wouldn't gotten to see any of this stuff." And he was like, "Yeah, that's what I was thinking." And you could tell right away he was pretty uncomfortable. And so then we stop in Basra. We eat on the local economy, stay at the hotel, and there was a gunfight like out in the street that night. It had nothing to do with us, and and I'm sleeping, and he gets up the next morning and we go to breakfast, and he's like, hey, did you guys sleep on the floor last night? And it's like, no, man, like sleeping on the floor. And he was like, did you hear that gunfire? And I was like, well, yeah. And I was like, they were shooting at you, man. And so, but he was the same guy that I think he only did one rotation with us. He was on the advanced team, I believe. And, they had rolled out, and it wasn't uncommon for them to throw improvised grenades up under and these were hardened SUVs, right? And they had thrown an improvised grenade down the road, and I think it unnerved him a little bit. And so he came to me and asked if he could be on the air team. And the MD 530, right? It's a little bird, right? It's pretty small. I'm a big guy for that bird. And this dude was like probably 6'2" or 6'3" or something like that. And I was like, yeah, I don't care. I asked Frank. And so, so he went and talked to Frank. That night, we're flying out to Bayup, and it was nighttime, and we got caught in the middle of a rocket attack. Had nothing to do with us. We were just flying along, and rockets start flying. And it was a crazy light show, and you're just like, at that point, what do? You just like, all right, hope I don't get me. And we come back, and the next day I see Frank, and I was like, hey, Frank, man, this is the guy that wants to get on the little birds. And he had heard the story about the rocket attack. He goes, nah, I think I'm more of a ground guy. And I was like, all right, never mind. So, yeah. Yeah.
So how long were you with Blackwater?
I did technically, I guess, 6 months. I was went there in January. I left April right after the Jeff incident. I had gotten a job with where I'm at now, actually, with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and I was engaged to the person I'm now divorced from, and good laugh from Grace over there, and so I got a call from them, and so I needed to be back in the States, and so I was still on the books with them, I think, until June when I transitioned out, and but yeah, that was my time with them. So between Haiti and that, I'd been out of the country for about a year. My fiance at that time was, like, hey man, you need to get a normal job in the U.S. And so I was like, all right,
what's abnormal about my job?
Yeah.
So I use this as an opportunity to transition to your current job, because the way you described it to me once is like, I get paid way too much money to have way too much fun.
Well, I don't think we can say that on the air. Yeah,
get way too much money?
Yeah, for what I do, because they might reduce my pay.
Yeah, that risk may come after, I don't know, they have 80,000 new agents. But, no, but the idea is, I never heard of that job to begin. First of all, how you land that job is, beyond me. But then the idea of why you do, and again, I know you only can share certain elements of it, but it's super unique, it's super fun, and it's such a unique skill set.
It's an anomaly. There's only 2, maybe 3 agencies that do what we do, and we're doing them for different groups, but we're all very similar. I found it by luck. It's, I was actually in Haiti when I started the search. I knew, my shelf life being engaged and wanting to get married and stuff like that was going to be limited. And so I was looking for something in the States, and I ran across this job with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and they do, we call it force on force. You guys probably know it as like red cell, where you're going out and attacking facilities, right? Mock attacks. And the way the job read, I actually thought I was going to be an adversary, like jumping and climbing fences, doing the attacks. But they use much younger guys for that, right? And so they're like, no, you're just going to evaluate. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I applied, didn't hear anything. And I had transitioned. I was in Iraq when I got the interview. And that was kind of interesting. I was actually at the residence, at Bremer's residence, and didn't have any air missions that day. And we called to set up a telephone interview. And I explained I was in Iraq, and they're like, yeah, that's fine. Well, you guys know it wasn't uncommon. Bad guys would sit on the other side of the Euphrates, and they would pull up the donkey carts and do the mortars over, mm-hmm. and that was pretty common, right? Like, they're not aiming; they're just lobbing stuff, and so. But you hear it, right? You know it's coming, and you hear like the.
Don't forget, he's Israeli. He's very familiar with rockets being lobbed.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't want to trigger any feelings. And,
You think I get excited?
right. Yeah.
I was actually, when we were in Israel, I was like, where are the rockets? I was like, it wasn't true. But then I saw the bunkers. I'm like, it's got to be true.
Yeah.
Oh, you saw the Arrow Dome too.
Yes. That was pretty cool.
So I think it helped me get the job because I was on the phone.
Well, it validated your BA-ness.
Yeah, the guy was Alan Madison. He was a good dude. He was the head of my interview. It was a 3-person panel. And I hear the rockets. I hear the foof, foof, foof. And I was like, hey man, can you guys hang on a second? I need to take cover. We're getting ready to get a rocket attack. And I said it just like that. And Alan goes, what? And I was like, it'd be just a second, man. And so put the phone down, get cover, hear the explosions. They're nowhere near. And then get back on the phone. I was like, okay, what was your question? And he goes, are you all right, man? And I was like, no, I'm good, man. What was your question? And he goes, did you just say you were in a rocket attack? And I was like, it's all right, man. Like I said, like, what was your question? And he was discombobulated. Like he was like, are you? And like, and so one of the other guys on the panel was a Marine. He was I think a major from 3-8. And,
wow.
And so I didn't know at the time, but he's laughing right at Alan's reaction. And I got a call a few days later and they're like, hey man, you got the job.
That's
and
awesome.
So
definitely like being in a rocket attack to get a job.
yeah,
And it's amazing, these little pockets of weird jobs.
I staged the whole thing.
I applied way back when I was getting out of the Marine Corps. It was with Department of Energy, not Nuclear Regulatory Commission, but I guess they're like SWAT teams that ride with the transports and stuff like that. And I made it through the pipeline, but my blood pressure disqualified me. I didn't understand like the whole deal, but I guess because they fly and they do it all.
Right.
And then like you never know they're there. They escort nuclear material and stuff like that. Yeah. They're very regulated and they're serious about health. So that's the way they describe it. He goes, look, you pass the PT test, you could do everything, but your blood pressure is a problem. You're going to have to address that.
And you're Puerto Rican.
It probably, they already met their quota. They already had enough Hispanics on the team.
So can you share a little bit about what it is that you actually do?
Yeah. So we're just because of the way the Atomic Energy Act works, we cover commercial nuclear, right? So nuclear power plants. And then like the other agencies I refer to, they take care of like the labs and the weapons, right? That's DOE. They're on that side. And so we kind of have a sister program with them that they kind of do very similar to what we do, but for the military DOD side of it. And so we take care of the commercial and basically we go out and it's a 2-week kind of evolution. It's a little bit longer than that, but we're on site 2 weeks. We basically go out the first week. It's a planning week. We look at their strategy. We do some tabletops. We do some tours of the site. We have active duty SOCOM members that work with us. And that's a joint team out of Tampa. So like we have some MARSOC guys, some SEALs, some SF guys that do kind of a rotation. It's good for them. It gives them
I was going to say, the training.
When I first started in the program, this was their op tempo wasn't very high. And so, now you got guys with, 7, 8, 9 deployments coming over to us for 2 or 3 years is a good break for those guys. And then a lot of them are getting towards the end of their career. And so it's a good transition for them to kind of network and start looking at options when they get out. And so we have those guys with us and basically go out and come up with an attack. We go out to in and then we do a mock attack. And we've got a group of young 20-somethings that we come back the B week and we run the exercise. And it's performance based. It's not tabletop. It's all
awesome.
Climbing and cutting fences and running and simulated explosives for wall breaches and things like that. And so, yeah.
And you get to learn about all the latest, toys out there.
Yeah, we stay up on pretty good on stuff. One of the benefits of you're having that clearance and stuff like that is you stay up on what the current threat environment is and then kind of what the current TTPs are and things like that. So that's beneficial. And then the SOCOM guys are always bringing in fresh stuff in terms of, what things look like and how things work. And so it's a really, I think, there's where there were 12, there's 9 of us now at my agency that do what we do. And I think there's only
that's reassuring though, at least that there's someone doing it. Now, and feel free to not answer if you can't, but Now, do you do this as well for, let's say, the private commercial industry as well? Because I know there's power plants out there and stuff like they may be regulated by the government, but they have like their own entities, like private energy companies and stuff like that.
We only do private commercial nuclear. We don't do fossil or any of those guys.
Gotcha.
Yeah, just nuclear.
So going back to the training side, and just knowing that you started teaching SWAT schools and law enforcement, coming out of the Marine Corps with tactics of the 90s, and now you're working with these tier 1 units that the tactics have changed slightly since. How does that affect the way you teach? When you and I go and teach a SWAT school, for example, right?
I'll be honest, like what really works, right? Like, I mean, there's only so many ways you can go through a door. There's only so many ways you can do something. You might see some subtle nuances in the way things change, but I think probably the big shift that we saw was early in Afghanistan, the tier 1 units that were going over had always been geared towards hostage rescue, right? It's all very dynamic, and they paid dearly for some of that, and I think, you've seen some of the tactics, like the way I've structured what I teach is one set of tactics that work going slow or fast. So whether you have a hostage that you've got to get in there and you've got to bypass areas, or whether it's barricaded, or whether you got to go slow or fast, it works. It's just a matter of how you control your speed and manage your time and movement and economy of motion. And so and that can be hard to translate, because we all know we see guys like they just want to go fast, right? And it's I use the acronym SPAR: see, process, and react. If you're moving so fast, how are you processing what you're seeing and then know how to react to it? So I would rather see guys go a little slower, and who wants to rush to their death?
It's funny, Steve and I were just teaching in Georgia recently, and we're teaching a single person right now,
starting with single person,
and kind of 2-person,
2 to 3 person entry.
Entry, and obviously a variety of levels from patrol officers to tactical, operators and so forth. But the whole concept of you can manage your speed was so hard to drive home. Like, you do not have to go super slow all the time, but you don't have to rush all the time either. And you have to be able to jack it up and turn it back down, depending on the environment and the situation, right? The scenario. So it was so interesting to see that, because stuff that we take for granted, it's
and it's unfortunate because me, right? Like the words that grate me so bad.
It's been working for us.
It's the way we've always done it. I've experienced it in law enforcement and special operations. I'm like, that's great, but there's better ways to do it. There's safer ways to do it and still achieve the objective, if not better, right, doing it this way. But they get so stuck. And this goes back to what you said, right? You have to recognize when I'm the past and you're the future, let's start evolving and adapting. And I would tell my officers that as a sergeant all the time. I'm like, I'm the past, you're the future. I'm here to support you, make sure you grow and succeed. But again, that goes back to a whole nother topic, leadership, mentorship, and all that stuff, So
I had the honor of working with a guy, Tom Greer, and CAG and, the unit. And I didn't meet him until he was after that. And he was one of our first directors for our adversary force in the job I'm in now. And I would say I learned, it's kind of like life. I learned a lot of lessons later that, man, I wish I'd known that earlier. And I learned a lot from Tom. He was one of those guys that I could just say, hey, it really made my job easy. I could say, hey, Tom, here's the target. We're thinking the South. And this guy, obviously with his background, could come up with a very effective mission assault. But it was really the other intangibles that I learned from him. And, he had been the guy that led the team looking for bin Laden in the Tora Bora Mountains. That he was on the ground early. And so I learned a wealth of knowledge from that guy in the 3 or 4 years that I worked with him. And unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago. And but it was, some of the things like, I think it was one of the key things I picked up from Tom was that, and I used it in your class the other day, was you're on a spectrum, right? Like wherever I am and with my operational experience or knowledge is still on a spectrum. There are guys that know infinitely more than I do that, I can learn from. And there's guys that I can help get better. And I don't care who you are, you're on that spectrum somewhere. And so to your point, like I don't like that term either, right? Well, this is the way we've always done it. You've stopped learning at that point, right? Mm-hmm. You got to continue to develop and learn, be a student. I don't like I hate the term SME. I don't like to say I'm teaching. I like to say I'm sharing what I know, right. Because it's all I know, right? And I'm going to share with you what I know, and hopefully you can use it in a good way, because I'm still learning from other guys. And what I showed you yesterday, I may change that the next time I see you. And so I think that's a much better approach than getting locked into a doctrine.
No, when we teach classes, we actually go to the students and say, we're going to live today learning something from you, which I'm going to steal, and I'm going to make it part of my training curriculum, right, for the next class, because that's the only way we keep evolving, right? There's always like you said, a little nuance that can make things maybe slightly better, but that may be the difference that one operator needed at that point in time, right? So I completely agree with you.
I love quoting Patton. Even though I was a Marine, I love General Patton. And I do believe that General Mattis is just Patton reincarnated. But like he always said, he goes, if everyone is agreeing, and doing the same thing, then nobody's thinking.
Right.
And that doesn't ring truer than in our world.
So I don't know who said the next one, but if you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room.
This is true.
Yep.
Yeah, and I'm totally okay with not being that person.
As long as you're not eating biscuits and riding a tricycle.
So let's talk about it. That's where I was trying to go with it, right? So we're teaching SWAT school in Shelby County. I'm going to let Dave, because he's actually the one that coined the term, right?
I thought it was you. I thought you came up with it.
Oh, no, who came up with it? Cornbread.
Yes, Cornbread came up with it.
I think you asked the question, cornbread.
Yeah, because when he said it, I was like, what? And he said,
Hey,
I'm just the one that made the patch.
What do you think he's thinking about? And then I guess.
Right. And I don't know if he's shown you the picture. Cornbread is like a mountain of a man. He looked like Andre the Giant. And so he goes, man, biscuits and tricycles. And I just looked at him, I was like, what? And he goes, he's so dumb, he couldn't ride a tricycle and eat a biscuit at the same time.
Well, the way thing happened, so we're at the shootouts. It's a sim shootouts, right? So it's all live fire. But he's making entry. First of all, he got stuck with the rifle coming through the door. But then as soon as he took that left, there's a wall right in front of him. And he just froze. Like, look at the wall. He didn't even turn to take that corner or anything. Just stop. And then Dave goes, I wonder what he's thinking about. And that's where Cornbread goes, biscuits and tricycles.
It was great.
And then for the rest of the class, he was Bravo Tango, biscuits and tricycles.
Yeah.
Then we made the patch. And nobody knew about it. Well, everybody knew about it except for that one officer until the guy that was organizing the SWAT school, when we awarded the certificates at the end, called him that to award him the certificate. But now there's a patch that we give in every class to the one special guy.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It was great.
No, you got to do stuff like that. That was good. So, all right, I'm going to make a 180. You are a Silver Savage on the prowl now. So I don't know, because I don't know. Are you on the prowl anymore? Or are you?
So I actually just recently started seeing someone. It's pretty fresh. Man, I saw that question on there. I was like,
I know Grace is here, so if you don't want to talk about it, you can ask her to leave because you're going to talk about it.
No, I hook him up. I get the pre-approval.
It's his Tinder account, but she manages it. She's
no.
Swiping left and right.
She's swiping for him.
She's my dating consultant.
Nice. You should try J-Date.
And so, I've been divorced twice. I don't know if I'm the right guy for this. Although you got me way beat, I think.
No, wait, but one more. I'm on my fourth wife.
Okay, all right.
3 divorces.
And so, yeah, I hate it, man. It sucks. Like, dating sucks. But I was seeing somebody for several months. I learned a lot from that experience. But I just met somebody. She's pretty cool and digging the vibe. And I think what I would probably offer people, because I don't have any good advice for like dating.
I don't think there is such a thing.
What I would tell people is don't get complacent. Like, if it's funny because like in our industry, we tell people trust your instincts, right? Like if something's not right or feels right in a security environment, you tell people to trust those instincts and get out of that. I would say the same thing is true in personal relationships, right? If you're dating and the vibe isn't right, something doesn't feel right, it's probably not. And that could be as simple as, we just need to talk about it and work it out. Or it could be like, you're not right for me, right? And I think people, it's easier to stay in that than it is to do the work and go out and find the right person. And so have the courage to be able to walk away and go find the right person.
Right.
I think is probably the most important thing I would share. In fact, it's funny, the timing. I had a guy call me yesterday, and I worked with him a couple of years ago. He's an engineer that he did a rotation with us, and he was a really good guy. And so he called me yesterday because he's now assigned at a site I'm getting ready to go to in a couple months. And so I call him up and I'm like, hey, boo boo. And I was like, what are you doing? And
Is his name Boo Boo?
no, but I
That'd
call
be
him,
awesome.
no, he's my boo boo.
Yeah.
So
like I'm your boo boo.
yeah,
Everybody needs a Boo Boo.
yeah, I'm a little jealous now. I thought he was mine, but
Well, you're
I'm your Boo Boo, but he's my Boo Boo.
I got you. Okay, let's see how this works.
It's a cycle of life. You know,
This might be going in the wrong direction. So
Carry on, you talk to Boo Boo.
So I called him up and he said, hey, I'm going to be there the A week you're there, but I'm not going to be there for the exercise week. And I'm like, what do you have that's more important? He's like, I'm getting married. And I was like, okay, sidebar. And I was like, I had a good talk with him. I was like, man, like, if you think about it, just you're an engineer, right? It's statistics, right? Like 57% of marriages don't last. 67% of second marriages don't last. Family law is not designed to support guys or the higher wage earner. Like, look at it from a risk model, right? Like,
Man, I fucked it all up.
yeah. So don't get me wrong. I told Grace, like, I'm not poo-pooing on marriage, but if she doesn't have a prenup when she gets married, I'm going to beat her with a rubber hose.
Yep.
So,
So the one thing I found out is, and I only found it late, obviously, going through a divorce and then meeting Tyler and being with Tyler is that, and I told her that recently, is I can be myself.
yeah.
Like, if you find that you need to make, not to say that you shouldn't compromise with your significant other, you should find that happy medium. But if that happy medium at some point makes you give up who you are, then that's not good.
Yeah, and I think the red flag is, if they're trying to change you or you're trying to change them, then it's probably not right, right? Like, it should be you're accepting that person and you can each be each other and support each other. Like, I shouldn't be their priority. They shouldn't be my priority. It should be whatever you're aspiring to in life, and that you're supporting each other and getting to that point, right? And so, yeah, but the main thing I would tell people is just have the courage not to stay if it's not comfortable. Like, don't be afraid to leave, because during that time you work on yourself, right? And yeah.
Well, to reinforce both of you guys, aside from the world we live in, the entrepreneurial world, I've learned a lot from you, BK, and Mike and whatnot. And one of the reoccurring things I see in the top 5 things to do, all right, to have success, whether it's in life or
Don't marry the wrong
entrepreneurial,
person.
it says it's always in there. Marry correct, or marry, right.
Yep.
Because that's going to make or break you when it comes to stuff like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, hopefully some of the listeners take advice, because, when I say it, people don't say it. So Dave, we are, this is obviously geared at Silver Savages, and we define it very broadly, but a savage can be anything from a warrior to, boo-boo the engineer who just wants to excel at this, or, wants to get remarried. What do you do? What's your routine like to kind of stay on top of your game nowadays?
Yeah, I think there's a balance. I would say in my much younger days, I was much more geared towards the tactical, right? The tactical aspects. And when you really look at it, you have the tactical, the operational, and then the strategic. And at some point, you got to recognize where you make those transitions. That, do I need to be on the range every day? Or do I just need to keep that skill sharp because I need to focus on other things as you transition through different phases in your life? And so, I don't get nearly as much range time as I used to. I think last year I may have hit the range 3 or 4 times. I will occasionally dry fire just to keep the rhythm and patterns. Still try and hit the gym pretty regular. I have Grace who tries to keep me motivated and like, hey, let's go work out today. She's a beast. And so,